Hi, my name is Leah Mushit. I'm a reporter here at the Western Standard, and today I have a guest named John Robson. He's the executive director of climate discussions NEXUS, which offers a forum of open debate on the topic of climate change and information and policy suggestions on climate change as well. He's also a journalist, he's an historian, and he has made multiple documentaries on the climate as well as other documentaries. So, John, today, welcome. Thank you for joining us. My first question to you is on the topic of one of your documentaries made in 2017, which was The Environment, A True Story. So basically, I know you told me that this documentary started your organization, NEXUS. So why don't you tell me a little bit why this documentary was so important starting your organization, as well a little bit about the documentary itself?
As you said, I'm a journalist, a disreputable profession, but someone has to do it. And I've been writing on a whole range of issues for a long time, including climate. And I'd made documentaries on World War I and on Canada's Constitution. And then I thought to myself, the debate on climate is very one-sided because anybody who has doubts about the orthodoxy is liable to get steamrolled. There are a number of rhetorical clubs that the alarmists will use. And I decided to make a documentary that tried to cover the whole of the debate, to deal with all the important issues, including the important arguments in favor of climate alarmism and why I thought that they were not convincing. So that if you watched that, you would be ready to speak up. If you had doubts, you'd have a sense that you knew what lines of attack you were likely to be subjected to and how to answer them. And as a result of that, I was contacted by people saying we should start an organization that does a weekly newsletter on the subject of climate and looks at the exaggerations, looks at the misstatements of fact, looks at the strange leaps of logic, so that somebody who reads the newsletter will feel that they're comfortable speaking up on the issue because they know how they're liable to be attacked, including the classic, 97% of scientists agree that there's a man-made crisis, and they won't just be bullied out of the arena. And so we started doing the newsletter, and we made a few videos as well. And for about the first year, to be honest, the uptake was limited. And then suddenly we went viral. And particularly, it was a longer video that we made, not long, but 25-minute range, addressing this claim that 97% of scientists say that there is an urgent man-made climate crisis. And we went into the details. Who did the surveys? What questions did they ask? Who did they ask them to? What strange stuff did they do with their samples? And within a couple of months, that video had hundreds of thousands of views. And so it turned out that what people really wanted was videos. So we now primarily make videos, though we do still do the newsletter. And what they want is for us to look at the critical things in the debate and the exaggerations and the misrepresentations. And because people are busy, they've got jobs, they've got lives, they can't spend all their time researching climate, but they need to be ready. If someone's going to say to them, 97% of climate scientists say this, they have to be able to say, no, actually, that's not right, and here's why. If people say, but don't you know that hurricanes are getting worse? They need to know, actually, we have good data on hurricanes going back many decades. They're not getting more common. They're not getting stronger. And so we give people what they need to enter the debate with confidence that they're not going to get blindsided.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, on that note, so you're saying that you guys now make more video content. So the most recent documentary that you've done is on Senegal. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that documentary?
We're very excited about it. Actually, we just held the premiere in Calgary on the 14th. And it's our first full-length documentary. Most of our videos are around 15 minutes long. And occasionally the editors can't make me stop and they go on to 20. But on this one, again, you have to go in the debate to where people are. You have to talk to the audience about things that they're concerned about and show them, if they've been misinformed or misled, how it happened. And one of the things that people say in the climate debate is that those companies that make hydrocarbon fuels, the gas company, the oil company, and so on. They don't care about people. They're just into short-term profit. They're going to burn up the planet, which is a pretty stupid plan since they're on it too. But it's actually completely wrong. And we had this chance because we met Magat Wade, who's this extraordinary entrepreneur and activist who's from Senegal. And as a result, we were able to meet people in Senegal and go and ask this question. What happens if the alarmists get their way? Suppose that they are able to prevent Africans who are living in poverty from developing fossil fuel resources, from getting electricity from natural gas, from getting electricity from oil, even from simple under which they live. The hoeing sand by hand. People, if you hear Senegal, you might think to yourself that we're in the rainforest, but it's on the very west tip of the Bulge of Africa. It's semi-arid. It's south of Mauritania. There are wild camels. And people there are scraping a living out of some very unpromising soil. In the village, half of Senegalese don't have electricity. Their schools don't have lights. They don't have air conditioning. There aren't factories. There aren't jobs. So people come to the cities, boys come to the cities to beg, girls are left back home to be forced into polygamous marriages. It's horrendous what happens to people because of energy poverty. And so we wanted to be able to show them this is what the activists are trying to perpetuate. They don't know it. I'm not saying the activists are consciously evil or anything of that sort, but they are culpably ignorant. They don't understand the implications of their policies. And so the documentary is called In the Dark, Senegal as a case study in energy poverty, because we wanted to underline just how cruel and thoughtless it is to deny poor countries the right to develop the kind of power that we take for granted. These activists in rich countries, they know the light switch is going to go on. They know that in the ER and the hospital, the machines are going to have power, the respirators and the x-ray machines and everything. They take for granted the benefits of abundant, affordable, reliable energy. And then they go and deny it to 1 billion people in the world or more. And we wanted to make very clear how bad that is. And so that anybody debating the subject knows what the trade-offs are, knows what the implications of the policies are. It's not enough that it sounds good. It has to do good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's pretty interesting. I guess on that topic, I remember in your first documentary, which I also watched, the environment one, you were talking about how lots of famous people, for example, one that stood out to me was Bill Nye, because I used to watch his videos in science classes when I was younger. So they were talking about basically how they should criminal investigations should be done on people engaging in discussions like these ones. And so there's lots of people, famous people, suggesting that criminal charges should be laid against people who are talking about climate change and questioning the narratives that are put forth by a bunch of climate activists. So I don't know, my question would be, since you relating back to the Senegal documentary and you're kind of warning, do you expect I don't know, that it would ever come to a point where it would be put into the criminal code, either in Canada or anywhere else in the West, or even if it has, that I'm not aware of?
I would like to push that idea aside as foolishness, but unfortunately, there does seem to be a significant appetite, primarily on the left, for criminalizing speech they disagree with. And I'm a John Stuart Mill fundamentalist on free speech. On Liberty, he gives these 3 great reasons why we should listen to ideas that are unfamiliar or even upsetting. The first one, of course, is it might turn out to be true. And a number of occasions in the past, things that were thought to be incontrovertible have been overturned by debate, including, William Wilberforce convincing the British to abolish slavery. The second thing is that even if something we think is true and we debate it turns out to be true, we have a much stronger and livelier apprehension of why it's true. It goes from being a kind of dogmatic statement we recite to a vibrant truth that we live. And the third reason is that sunlight destroys evil, that if you suppress bad ideas, they fester in the dark. And so to me, I think it's very revealing when you see people who are afraid to debate an issue and reach for the policeman's truncheon to silence views they don't share. including on climate. What are the alarmists so scared of? They say that their argument is ironclad, the science is settled, only a lunatic could doubt it. And then you invite them to debate and they refuse. Are they actually worried that they don't really know the subject nearly as well as they pretend to? Are they concerned that they got up on stage, if Bill Nye were to get up with me in front of an audience, that I would actually convince them and he would fail to? Because if not, I can't understand why they're not saying, bring it on. Let those fools babble and we will refute them. But they're obviously very afraid to do it. They won't debate. And as you say, a number of people seem to think the shortcut here is just to ban dissent from orthodoxy. And how do they have this image of themselves as free spirits and support government censorship at the same time? It's a very strange combination of views.
Yeah, that doesn't really make any sense. Kind of, yeah, hypocritical. But I guess what I also wanted to touch on is like one of the ones you also mentioned, the 97% of scientists agree, which is, I guess, factually not true. Because in your environment documentary as well, you said it's actually 2.38% of scientists agree. Could you explain more, like what exactly do you mean by that and what you said in the documentary, if you recall?
Well, the first thing is when someone says 97% of scientists agree, the first question you should be thinking is, who asked them and who did they ask? Because if you look around the world, there are obviously a lot of scientists, right? There are a lot of fields of science, and these fields all have tens or hundreds of thousands of practitioners. So how would you go about establishing what scientists thought? And by the way, you'll see some people say 97% of climate scientists. Some people say 97% of the world's scientists. And those are two very different claims. But even if it was climate scientists, then, okay, what constitutes a climate scientist? We're talking astrophysicists here, atmospheric physicists, certainly, geologists, chemists. Who are these people? And however you define it, you're going to get millions, literally millions of them. So who contacted millions of people and asked, and what did they ask them? And the answer turns out to be that people sent surveys to a few tens of thousands of people. And the one that got the most apparent overwhelming response, the questions were, do you think it is warmer today than in 1850? And do you think humans have had some impact on the environment? And of course, you're going to get an overwhelming yes response to both of those things because we were coming out of the Little Ice Age in 1850. Obviously, it's gotten a little bit warmer, though it's not clear how much. And as for have humans had any impact on the environment? Well, as soon as somebody dumps a can of paint in a river, humans have had some impact on the environment. Another survey, they sent out tens of thousands of responses. They got back thousands and they winnowed them down to the ones they liked. And if you look at the Climate Discussion Nexus video on the 97% solution, it goes into the details on these surveys. But the upshot of it is that they were not asked what Barack Obama in his very famous tweet that 97% say that there is an urgent man-made crisis. They were not asked, is it urgent? They were not asked, is it a crisis? They were not asked, is it man-made? And so that was, again, I'm not suggesting that Obama was committing fraud, but he was being very, very culpably sloppy. He didn't know what he was talking about, and he shouted it. And then all kinds of people repeated it. And for another thing, they would say, if I tried to raise the issue, they'd say, oh, you're not a climate scientist. Yeah, well, neither's Barack Obama, neither's Greta Thunberg, right? Not these people, they're very selective in their attempts to shut you out of the debate. But if you look at those surveys, you realize that 97% number is wrong. And as soon as people understand, first of all, it's not true that there's an overwhelming scientific consensus. And second, the people who say so don't check their facts. Then they're emboldened to say, okay, what else are they telling us that's not true? And another example, of course, is more and more wildfires. The Canadian government puts out about 3 press releases a week about, oh, there's more wildfires. But we've got good wildfire numbers going back decades, and there are not more wildfires. That's simply not true. Other things, are the seas rising faster at the moment than they were 30 years ago? There's some debate on that, but it looks like maybe yes, but it's all just within the realm of natural fluctuation. So again and again, the more you get into the climate alarmist claims, the more you realize that they're as sloppy as they are belligerent. And that's a terrible combination if you're actually trying to find the truth.
Well, I guess talking about finding the truth and stuff, this question just kind of occurred to me. I know you said like obviously people want to watch videos and stuff, but you think also, I don't know if you would know, but do you think lots of youth are also watching your videos?
We do attempt to figure out the demographics, but to some extent, of course, I mean, we can't make people watch our videos. All we can do is put out what we think is important and useful information in a way that is engaging, because people are busy. They've got lives. I used to work as a newspaper editor, and I had to remind my colleagues periodically that nobody has to read our paper. So if it's boring, they'll just turn the page. And I think that anybody who is considering dropping by to watch our videos, please do so. I think you will find that they are as entertaining as they are informative. Well, we don't say things for effect. We're not into clickbait, but we respect the fact that your time is limited, and we're going to give you an experience that will be valuable to you. In every respect, you'll come out better informed, better able to articulate what you believe, and you won't feel that it was drudgery. We don't serve cod liver oil over at the Climate Discussion Nexus.
No, from what I watch from your videos, I completely agree. And I think as well that the reason I mentioned youth is because I definitely think like this is something I feel like should be a part of the curriculum in science classes or even in universities for certain classes, these science courses, because I definitely think most of the climate narrative is still pushed in the curriculum. So that's also why I mentioned that. But for the next question, I kind of wanted to also touch on the natural cycle of warming and cooling of the planet and how this is kind of proof that climate change is just a natural kind of process that the Earth always goes through. And maybe you could explain more about that.
That's an excellent point. And it's an excellent point partly because you will often hear alarmists say that people like me deny climate change. And this again it's preposterous ignorance or worse, because actually what's critical to our view of the whole situation. And as you mentioned, I'm a historian by training. And when climate change first came up, I thought one of the really fishy things about this is they claim that the climate didn't change until the Industrial Revolution. And I know that's wrong. Even within recorded history and certainly prehistory, the climate has changed constantly. And even since the last glaciation, the warm period that we're currently in, the Holocene, the Ice Age didn't end. There's still significant ice at the poles. But since the last glaciation, the temperature has fluctuated dramatically. It shot up to the Holocene climatic optimum, and then it went down again, came up for the Minoan warm period, down in the Iron Age's dark ages, back up for the Roman warm period, down again for the classic dark ages, up into the medieval warm period, down into the Little Ice Age. And none of that correlates with atmospheric CO2. We have decent proxies, though not absolutely reliable ones. It's not driven by CO2. And then you get a period of about 30 years in the latter part of the 20th century where temperature and atmospheric CO2 are rising. And that's the narrow foundation on which their theory rests. But the further back you look back into the Pleistocene. This is the last 2.58 million years, which is ice at both poles. And you see that there are long periods of cold and glaciation, and then there are these brief interglacials. And the previous three interglacials, including the Eemian, were warmer than the Holocene. Yet again, atmospheric CO2 was lower, clearly no human influence. Anatomically modern humans weren't even around. And the whole anthropogenic global warming theory can't begin to explain that stuff. And it's preposterous to call us deniers when it's them who can't face the historical record, because everything about it shouts, no, you're wrong. CO2 is not the control knob on the global thermostat.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty interesting too, because definitely I didn't know about that until very recently when I started watching, like, for example, your videos and like Friends of Science as well. I know they talk about that stuff too. So yeah. But let's see. Okay. Since you said that your documentary about the Senegal climate change, case study for climate change and policies and stuff was done in Calgary, why don't you tell me, why did you guys choose Calgary?
We chose Calgary partly because we have a number of friends out there, and also because I feel that the Canadian energy industry has in some ways not done a good enough job of standing up for themselves. They thought governments would be reasonable, which as a historian is a view that I find a little hard to believe. And we think it's essential that when they're criticized for being indifferent to human suffering, when you're involved in a debate of this sort, you need to meet the audience where they are. You need to acknowledge the claims of your critics, and you need to answer them. And so I wanted to encourage people who do work in Canada's magnificent energy industry. What Michael Binion calls it a modern miracle, and it is. It's astonishing the things that we enjoy thanks to hydrocarbon energy. I wanted to encourage them, understand that people think you're indifferent to human welfare. And don't say, yeah, but look at the money we're making or any of that stuff. Don't say, look at the tax revenue. Say, no, that's completely wrong. Look at the kinds of ways in which people suffer, including in Senegal. We went to one village where they've got one solar panel and it peters out when the sun goes down. And they don't have indoor plumbing, and they don't dare go out at night in the dark because of all the snakes and so on. And we talk to people who they cook with wood, they get smoke in their eyes, they breathe it in, especially in the rainy season. They're cooking indoors, backbreaking labor, carrying it on their head for miles, no medical clinic. This is what happens if you deny people fossil fuels. And so if you're going to say, look, we think humanity's giving off too much CO2, then at the very least, let's say, okay, Canada maybe, or the United States, advanced countries should do something about it, including China, but don't ask Africans to sacrifice. Half the people in the world with no access to electricity live in sub-Saharan Africa. And if you're going to say that's fine by me, I think they should keep living that way, at least go and see it. Better yet, go and share it. Try it on you. As Abraham Lincoln once said about slavery, anytime he heard someone defending it, he had an urge to try it on them. Understand the implications of this pious statement. And the international lending agencies are all in on this, right? They won't lend money to countries for natural gas power plants. It's got to be solar. It's got to be wind. At least understand what you're doing to people. And for the Canadian energy industry, stand up for yourselves, not as, yeah, what are you going to do? Not as, yeah, we're the least bad, but as we transform lives for the better. This product brings hope to people. It brings light in the darkness. It is a miracle. And we should be proud of what we do. Don't apologize for the industry. Don't duck and hope they kill somebody else. Stand up proudly for what the technological proficiency, but also the life-changing impact of Canada's energy industry.
Okay, I think that was well said, and I also think that's a great place to end. So thank you very much, John. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, well, if you guys like this video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Western Standard, or you can check out our actual website, westernstandard.news. We got a bunch of news, obviously, so you can subscribe for $10 a month or $100 a year. And yeah, that's all I got to say. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye.